What's going on, team? Dr. Andrew Fix back here for another episode on the code. Really appreciate your time tuning in to listen to this episode, and very excited to be bringing another awesome interview conversation to you guys. Man, this one is spanning across the globe. We've got Dr. David joining us here all the way from Switzerland, and we're going to get into this book that he recently authored titled "Investors in Longevity." David's currently yeah, there's the book right there. Thanks for that. He's currently operating an organization called Gray Cells, which he's going to tell us all about. David, thank you so much for tuning in, joining me here on the code.
Andrew, nice to meet you. Nice to talk to you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. And when we're trying to coordinate schedules from this many time zones apart, sometimes we run into some little schedule snags, but I'm glad we finally got this one lined up. And for me and all the folks listening to this conversation, can you do us a favor and just more thoroughly introduce yourself, Dr. David? Like, I know you've been working in many different countries. I think you just told me 35 different countries you've worked in a lot of different industries and organizations. But tell us more about you and then where the book, Investors in Longevity, ultimately came from.
Okay, pleasure. So I have two PhDs, one in health economics and the other is in health systems, both of them health, but one has a business orientation and the other has an economics or research orientation. One is from England and the other one is from France. I have been working for the International Labor Organization for 20 odd years. And through this organization, I think I was the only health economist at the time in the organization. And so while I was very keen on having field postings, they said to me, sorry, we only have one health economist. You'll have to fly across the world, which I did for many years. And some people think it's the dream job. I can tell you, I was very happy to retire when I stopped having to fly about 200 days a year.
Ooh, that's a lot.
Because I saw too many airports, too many lounges, too many delayed flights, and too many other complications with this. So I'm very glad to be more sedentary. But before I became sedentary, after my retirement at 60, there were all kinds of hypotheses and theories about how to reach a lot of people who today have no health insurance at all and no access to services, really, to speak of. And we're talking half the world's population. We're not talking a small number.
Yeah.
We're talking about 4 billion people in the world. And the question was, the systems that we have now are great for countries that are relatively wealthy, relatively organized, and relatively ordinary in that sense that everybody pays, or almost everybody pays taxes, and the government knows who you are, when you were born, whether you have a family, whether you have assets, where you live, etc. But there are lots of countries that don't have that. And if they don't have that, they can't collect taxes.
Yeah.
So if you have no taxation, government doesn't have money. If it has no money, it cannot deliver services or even organize services. And if people have very low income, they can't have insurance. And so I spent 10 years in India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, Cambodia, Rwanda, and very many other places to work on a model which I had developed, which is different from the regular health insurance schemes. Both the British system, which is called the Beveragian system, which you know very well in Canada, which is different from the US system, or the more prevalent European system, which is called the Bismarckian system. And of course, there is the commercial health insurance, which is the dominant in the United States, and not only in the United States. So I had to develop a different model, which functions based on different proposals, different principles. And as we are now seeing a quick, unexpected, and quite serious decline in funding by governments, notably the United States government, but not only, because it has trickle effects on many other countries, we're starting to see that the resilience of people-based, community-based schemes are actually stronger in such situations of crisis because the dependence on top-down decisions and on top-down money has changed.
Ah.
That brings us very well to our topic. One of the reasons that intrigued me in writing this book was that I came across bits and pieces of information that longevity has become a pet topic for billionaires.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are 1,832 billionaires in the world, and only a small minority of these are interested in our topic. So I wouldn't want to give the impression that every billionaire is invested in this. That's not
Yeah.
the case at all.
Yeah.
But there are some with very considerable firepower that have put in considerable amounts of money.
Mm-hmm.
And then the first question that comes right up on the agenda is, we have all grown up and lived for years with the notion that public money creates public health, that the government drives the research, the dissemination, the control, the regulation, the authorizations, and of course, the expenditure. When this now goes away, and we are now faced with much more private money, does that mean we're going to have private health?
Mm.
Does it not raise immediately the question, well, is it the billionaires who want to live forever, but all the rest of us will have less and less because there is less and less government money?
Mm.
To this, I want to say yes and no, because that's one of the key questions that I think every listener would be interested to know. How does that affect me? The billionaires invest money. How does that affect me? Where do they put it into medical research, drug development, discovery, and very many things that have a very long distance between the bench and the breakthrough,
Mm-hmm.
and between the lab and the market. All kinds of interferences because it's a complicated science and it is a complicated process. But even when we start seeing certain features, certain products, certain services become much more interesting, much more effective, before they can actually be implemented, you need very, very large numbers, very large cohorts of tests before you can say that this drug or this process is more favorable than negative,
Mm-hmm.
because the
Mm-hmm.
risks are such that we can't experiment with people. And this is why there is all the testing of things before they go to market. And that number far, far, far exceeds the number of billionaires. So if we have 1,832 billionaires in the world, even if each and every one of them were to agree to be in some kind of a test group,
Yeah.
which I doubt very much, of course, we'd still not even have 10% of what we need. We
Mm.
need anywhere, depending on what it is, in the tens of thousands or in the hundreds of thousands. And we needed sufficiently diversified in terms of income groups,
Yeah.
population groups, educational background, physical background, racial background, to become a prevalent medicine or a prevalent medical procedure.
Mm-hmm.
So the good news is private money is going to help as well. So the question is, when? Your answer is as good as mine. I don't know.
Yeah.
I do know that there's something, a price tag, that makes them extremely selective. Still, it's positive because that also provides some kind of information which would otherwise not be available.
Mm-hmm.
But we've also seen some elements where the price is dropping very, very quickly, like we've seen with any other things. The point here is that we've seen that with technology mainly. If you remember, or if you've heard from your parents' generation, computers used to cost a huge amount, and computers used to be the size of a room, when now they're a laptop and they cost a very affordable amount of money. Now, that is also true with the development here, except technology was a matter of a technical device. Health depends on people.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's not a technical device. So the game is different here, and the variations, including in price, may be slower to come and very different.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that comes to mind, David, is like as you're going through, all this research and data gathering to, across all these different groups and whatnot, if we were just to boil it down, the title of the book, Investors in Longevity, in this context, how would we define the word longevity?
Longevity is a composition of two kinds of um, phenomena. The first is the number of years we live. If we have moved, let us say, when the Industrial Revolution started in the mid 19th century, longevity in one of the most developed countries in the world, which was the most technologically advanced and obviously very important for the Industrial Revolution, Germany, longevity was around 45 years old.
Mm.
So today, longevity is 80, 82 years old, 83 years old, depending on the country and the gender.
Yeah, right.
So
Right.
the number of years is one aspect of longevity. But the other aspect, which is not less important, certainly in terms of this book and in terms of the effort that it represents or that it describes, is not only life expansion or life expectancy, but also life quality.
Yeah.
How many years can we expect to live as with full functionality,
Mm-hmm.
cognitive, motor, vision, and virtually everything else?
Yeah. Kind of that
So
conversation between,
aging is not considered to be a disease. Sorry?
no, yeah, I was going to say kind of that conversation between lifespan or life expectancy and true like health span. How long do you actually have your health and you can actually utilize this vehicle, this body of yours to do the things and be the things that you want to do and be.
So you see, we have a whole set of lists, a list of things where we know that there is an age-related deterioration today,
Mm-hmm.
from hearing to eyesight to taste to all kinds of issues relating to the orthopedic health.
Yeah.
Certainly a lot of issues relating to cognition,
Mm-hmm.
memory, the degree of muscle tone that we have in the body.
Yeah.
Even if we're perfectly healthy, we don't have the same muscle tone when we are 8, 18, 58, or 88.
Yeah.
That's nature. And that has effects. That is not deniable. So the effort that is going into this relates to the root causes why we're seeing age-related deterioration or diminution of capacities. And the effort is not to just find a cure to a disease, but once we have identified certain processes, such as the degeneration of cells and similar,
Mm-hmm.
then the idea here behind this investment, in which the book describes, is how can this be reversed so that
Yeah.
those cells that deteriorate in terms of their capacity with age would not. So it's not a correction in the nature of what a doctor does or what most medical devices and medical medicines do. It is, in fact, trying to reprogram the entire system genetically and of various other aspects, which some people say, well, this is like playing God. Maybe it is. But actually, if we have these things doable in a lab, then for those who think that this is a God-given capacity, the inventions in lab are also God-given. It's part
Mm,
of the same thing. So I
sure.
don't really think that there is an issue here of evolution versus revolution. That's not the issue really here.
Yeah.
The issue is that there are some things that we simply didn't know, just as we did not know, we didn't have medicines for very many issues or procedures, which we today treat as completely curable.
Yeah.
And that is the approach of some of the big investors. Brian Johnson thinks that death is an unnecessary nuisance. Peter Thiel thinks that this is, well, an inconvenience. Maybe we can do something about it. Jeff Bezos also has ideas about this, not maybe as radical, but also in the same vein,
Hmm.
that life should continue for at least another 10 to 20 or 30 years. And while we are alive, alive means we can go to the moon or we can do whatever we want to do.
Yeah.
So the demand is give us more years, but also give us much more capacity within those years
Yeah.
to do everything that we would like to do, that we have been considering normal to do in the first half of our lives.
Yeah.
So
And I
that's
think,
what longevity is.
no, I love the way that you unpacked that because I think, for myself, for surely the folks I would imagine that are listening to this podcast and these conversations, that's what I think we're all after is, we're not necessarily after how can I live forever, but how can I live as fully as possible for as many years as I do have available to me? How can I maximize those things? What have you been finding, for someone who maybe hasn't read this book or has not been longly studying the topic of longevity? We talked about how like much of this is not like a medical curing type of situation, instead trying to stop or decrease the degradation and reducing in capacity of like our cells and stopping the decline. What have you been finding are some of the most impactful things to leading to that decline in function and decline in cellular activity in the first place? Like um, what can we start to put our attention to try and improve the conversation in our favor to boost longevity?
So some of the most promising technologies, which are being funded by private capital against aging, include cellular senescence, epigenetic reprogramming, mitochondrial rejuvenation, and cellular reprogramming.
Hmm.
These are all loaded names, complicated, and people who want to know more would need to read a little more, even though it's not very complicated, but a little more explanation on what each of those means. Most of the chapter 2 is devoted to this. Basically, what we're seeing is that there are certain phenomena in the human body which have been analyzed as the root causes of exactly the matters that you're asking
Hmm.
about,
Yeah.
the things that we consider to be age-related. And the experiments, notably with laboratory animal, mice and others, is showing remarkable changes in certain reversal,
Mm.
not only slowing, but even reversal of those deteriorations.
Hmm.
So in mice, certain elements have been shown through processes that are very technical. And I don't suppose that this blog is really intended to be that technical, but just let's say when we have the question of cellular senescence, it means that the cells which have edges, and those edges wear off with time, are no longer as functional, cannot regenerate as they used to when we were younger. That relates to regenerative medicine. And the name regenerative means we want the body to regenerate whatever needs to be exchanged. We want not the spare part, but the internal growth to simply keep everything as good as it was before.
Yeah.
So it is basically the model of if it works, don't fix it, but it should work as it should,
Yeah.
not less than what we really want to do. And there are four domains that I mentioned, which are the most promising ones. But they relate to everything that is combining a whole set of changes that relate to very many of the age-related effects we've spoken about. The other very big thing that is coming and that is showing already quite considerable progress, which is not just with laboratory animals and chemistry and experimentation, is personalized medicine.
Yeah.
Personalized medicine and AI in drug discovery are very pivotal in making headway. The AI in drug discovery is actually helping medical doctors today be much more on the ball in terms of what kind of suitable medicines can actually deal with certain conditions.
Hmm.
Because the process of diagnosis is complicated, requires a lot of information, and the more information we have, the better it is. But the human mind does not compete with machines in processing very, very large data sets
Sure.
at very short time. This is where the advance of machine over human memory is predominant. But when AI does some of this back office work and zooms it down, reduces it down to more convenient and more accessible pieces of information, then we've really gotten a huge advantage in personalized medicine. And personalized medicine goes to the degree that you're not just prescribed a certain medicine for a certain condition, but you're prescribed or you are given something that relates to the specific day and the specific hour of the day when a certain portion of that active ingredient might be effective. Because this is not the case today. Today, when we take a pill, we take a certain statistical average and it is distributed relatively across the day, or at least part of the day, but it is not targeted to the most effective hours of the day when the body can assimilate the effect best.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not targeted to the quantity that may be most suitable for each and every case. So personalized medicine is really going a very big way in translating the findings into something that each and every person may need, but each and every person individually.
Now it sounds
So
like
this is also
that's
a huge change in terms of
yeah, it sounds like
a
that's kind of
huge
the
change in terms
future
of
of where we're going from a medicine
what we've
standpoint.
seen in very many industries. We've seen the opposite. We've seen that there were standards set, which were general standards, from clothes to housing to very many other things. There was a move away from individualization and into standardization
Mm.
for obvious reasons. Now, what we're seeing in medicine, after maybe the first time in history, really, we're seeing that personalized medicine is on the agenda.
Yes, we're sort of going back to the way, in a way, back to what the process was before versus making it standardized. How much, how much now are we seeing this rebirth, if you will, of personalized medicine like actually being implemented across the globe? You had mentioned before that there's a little less than 2,000 billionaires in the world. I think you said 1832. And many of them, not all of them, but they are a lot of the ones that are funding this private money towards this longevity research. But over 4 billion people on the planet don't really have access to, large scale healthcare or health insurance the way that we think about it in a very industrialized area, like where we live here in the United States or where you live. So how much are we seeing this personalized medicine start to actually get re-implemented across the globe to where like what areas or what kind of people actually are having access to that today here in early 2025?
We are not yet at the stage where personalized medicine is really the domain of uh, the public at large in any country that I know of.
Gotcha.
It is coming. There is more talk about it. There is more understanding of its benefits and how it can work. But you realize that this is a huge change in the entire value chain, from the way companies need to repackage everything that they put on the market to the way that the intermediary between us and those products and services act. And those intermediaries are, of course, the medical doctors, the hospitals, the paramedics, everybody else that renders medical services, which are today based on statistical standards, not on individual situations. And when we say personalized medicine, we're talking about individualizing it. This is, I think, the first time in human history that this is on the agenda. The best we could reach until now, and we're still in that stage, was to fine-tune the statistics, increase the cohorts so that the data is more reliable, that the results are more fine-tuned. But now we're talking about a different game altogether, based on the individualized picture in terms of your cell structure, in terms of what is actually, which part of the cells is dysfunctional or can be enhanced. So it is a totally different game. It's not yet practiced on any broad range, but it is already part of the research discussion. And that is already a huge step forward.
Yeah. Yeah. As we're gradually getting close to the end of our time here, I want to take this conversation. I think we have about 10 minutes left before we'll, get to the end of our meeting. What information can the average person, right, no matter where they live, the United States, where probably most of our listeners are, but we do have listeners from other places as well. If we don't have large scale access to personalized medicine yet, we may in many of our lifetimes, but this is advancement that's continuing to come down the line. What can the average person start to do today to either improve their opportunity for longevity, their health span, or to slow down the degradation of their capacity of their cells? What are the things that we can start to implement today? And then in order to learn more, I'd encourage everybody to go pick up your book, because the copy you sent me was great and kind of eye-opening of like the things that are going on in the more broader picture. But David, what would you say people can start to do or implement today along this topic?
Well, the most important thing they can do is start to get informed. It's not yet that you go to a supermarket or to a medical center and you tell them, I'd like to A, B, and C, which most people would have copied from the internet without really understanding the full ramifications. But getting informed, becoming informed about what are the main issues that are being developed that actually are the root causes of what we consider age-related issues. So that the dialogue around what the solutions might be would be an informed dialogue rather than an uninformed dialogue in which one party knows as best most of what is being discussed and the other party says, yes, doctor. That is a huge, huge process. And we're talking here about the population that is most interested in your question and in my answer. It's the population that is in the middle of its life today. Teenagers will be much less interested. People in their early 30s have other issues to focus on. It's from the first heart attack or from the mid-40s when people say, well, maybe I better pay attention to my diet, to my exercise, and to all kinds of other things, which are important, but they don't necessarily of certain phenomena which maybe accelerate the deterioration. But the root cause is not that. The root cause may be something else. So the first issue, I think, is getting informed. And getting informed means that you have to talk to people, reach people who are no longer in school, who are no longer, when they come back from their job, they would like to sit on the couch, probably watch TV, have dinner, maybe have a chat with their family, and that's the end of the day. But this is the time they have to really reconfigure their own thinking about how well life is. I did a little bit of activity on genealogy. It has nothing to do with longevity, but has everything to do with longevity. So I found all kinds of pictures of my ancestors in the 18th and 19th century. Before that, there were no pictures. And you see people who, when you see their photo at 20, 25, when they got married, you see those married pictures. They look great. They look
Sure.
as fit as a fiddle. And then you see them at 50, and you understand why they died so young.
Mm-hmm.
It was really amazing. So there is a lot more of a healthy embrace to our period today in most countries.
Yeah.
But still, a lot of people simply don't know. They don't know what's the problem, and they don't know what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
What are the issues on which some people are investing so much money? So if you recommend to people, as you have, they should read my book and maybe several other books on this topic, I think it's the best advice one can give, because everything else is completely caged within the domain of medical provision as we know it today.
Yeah.
And this is something that is going to change. Before it changes, people need to know a lot more of what they want to expect before they can expect to want.
Yeah.
You're not going to get it.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point because I think the days are gone, or like you're sort of saying, they should be gone, of where the individual just goes into their physician's office and they just say, "Yes, doctor, I'll do exactly what you say," without any understanding of why, or like what is the understanding or the why behind the decisions that are being made. I like to use the phrase like it's each of our responsibility to be the CEO of our own healthcare, of our own longevity, of our own life and how we take care of ourselves. That's our job. It's not our doctor's job to do that. They're a resource that we get to utilize and bounce ideas off of and whatnot. And they may be a lot more educated on a particular topic than us, but not necessarily. If you do a lot of your own research and you, like you said, get informed, there's many very well informed, very smart individuals out there that are not the physicians that can help guide some of these decision making processes. So like I sort of mentioned, Dr. David, we'll put the link to your book in the show notes of this episode. But for everyone that was tuning in, that this brief conversation kind of like piqued their interest a little bit, and they wanted to reach out and gather some more information or find you, what are the best ways for people to do that, to find you online and get some more information?
Well, in the book, I think I've even put my email. So I am available through that. And the book is available on Amazon. And in the audiobook version, it's on Spotify and I think on all the distribution channels that exist. I have only recorded the audiobook. I've not actually gone to the various distribution channels. So I believe it's available everywhere. And in terms of how to get in touch with me, that is the best way. Otherwise, it's probably LinkedIn or something like that.
Awesome.
But before we close, I would like to give you and the audience a sort of a coherent closing message, if we may.
Yeah, that sounds great.
I think that what we're really talking about, beyond the question of describing what money goes to what investments and describing why this is important for each and every one of us and not just for those who invest. I think that there is a cultural shift that is in the making here.
Mm.
And the cultural shift, I would say, aging needs a rebrand. Aging isn't a downhill side. Aging is actually an upgrade waiting for better PR. And we can flip the script. Longer lives mean more time for growth, for purpose, for second acts, or third acts even.
Yeah.
It's time to value experience rather than expiration. We have this association that age means expiry date. I think we need to rebrand that. Experience is a huge value. It's not just a repetition of everything that you've done once that you are repeating again. Every experience, every age creates a different vision on the world. And if your memory holds, and I have some friends who are in their 90s, and it's unbelievable. There is no discussion in which they don't know the history of forever. Yeah. Because their memory holds on. They haven't deteriorated. So I've seen such people, and I'm really amazed. Not everybody is going to be 150 in the very near future. But even if you reach the centennial, if you have a world in which the becoming 100 or 110 is not abnormal, that changes this situation completely. It changes everything. Work, wealth, and welfare. All three are at stake. Because if people will live to 100, they will probably work to 80 or 85 or maybe a little more. Who knows? It may not be exactly the same work, but it will be work, nevertheless, activity. Yeah. And work is very important. Then the question of wealth. Today, we're thinking a lot about the fact that much of the wealth of the middle class didn't come from work. It comes from inheritance. Let's just recap. Work. Obviously, if we live longer, considerably longer, we will also work longer. If we have our health span, our capacities with us, there is no reason why we wouldn't. We would have every incentive and every need to continue working. So if you add to the workforce 10 years of people with experience, with capacities, with technological society, absolutely huge. The second aspect, people will obviously, when they live longer, will also need welfare services much, much longer. And welfare services are a very expensive part of health expenditure in general and private expenditure on people at the end of their life. Now, in terms of wealth, I mentioned before, but we may have been cut off, that part of the income of middle-class people is, in fact, through intergenerational transfer, through inheritance. But if people live longer, the inheritance will come later. So if people get their inheritance at 50 or 60, it balances off most of their responsibilities to family and whatnot, mortgage, etc. But if that intergenerational transfer comes when people are 80 or 85, the game is different. And if it comes at 90 or 100, the game is yet different. So on the three very important aspects of work, welfare, and wealth, longevity has a huge set of impacts. Now, let me move on to one more concluding thought. How important is this game? Is this not going to disappear because it takes such a long time to make it happen? And of course, make it happen also means profits from these investments. The answer, I think, is in the numbers. In 2021, the longevity market was valued at approximately 17 trillion US dollars. In 2025, that's the year we are in, it's $27 trillion.
Did you say 27?
And for 2027, 2 years hence, the estimate, now it's 27. This year, too, yeah. 27. But the projections of growth on this, in the investment, we're talking about 64 billion in 2027. In other words, we've got a huge compound annual growth of about 34% a year. When you think that this is the amount that is going into the development, you realize that we are talking about an accelerating, not a decelerating process. And if this process is accelerating, our need to become informed about it also accelerates. There is a much, much more real reason to learn what will make the difference.
Mhm.
So it's not just a nice to have. It's silly not to know, silly not to learn, silly not to learn now. And I think this is an important message for people who tend to read less. So there are several books, of course, which I had to scan through and study before I could write my book. In fact, the references pages, there are 16 pages of references in my book, 211 references. And the entire book is very readable because I thought my audience is not composed only of medical doctors and high flying financiers. My audience is people like you and me. We
Yeah.
get a lot of information. We are curious about a lot of things, but we have neither the time nor the uh, inclination to read 600-page books.
Hmm.
That's not the game here. The game is to read something quick, understandable, to simplify the very complicated processes into in simple language that everybody can understand without having a PhD in chemistry or a PhD in pharmaceutical sciences or a PhD in something else or a medical doctor degree. This is not the case here. The case is really that we need to popularize the information. Longevity is such an important topic, and why the cultural change that I talked about is so important, because basically this is not the domain of doctors, it's the domain of culture, and culture is all of us. So the cultural shift will come when we all are more informed, and that's why I took the trouble of writing the book, and that's why I'm trying to disseminate this information. And there are many other books. Most of them are for specialists, but there may be some few others that are not so very complicated, but
Hmm.
quite a number still are. Um, but the topic concerns us all, everybody.
Yeah, I love that. I think that was a great way, David, to, to close this out. And I like that you said, you know, implored us to be curious and to make ourselves informed and go read the books and read the articles and like do the things that are going to help us gather more information on this topic, because it does impact all of us and it's going to impact all of the people that come after us, our kids, other generations, and things like that. So, um, I think this was awesome. Like I mentioned, I'll put the information to your book, Investors in Longevity, and some of the others that you were referencing there in the show notes for this
Here it
conversation.
is once more.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Be sure to pick that up, you guys. If you have any questions specifically about it, please reach out to David. Please reach out to myself, and we'll be sure to get back to you. But again, for all of you that tuned in to listen to this episode on the code, really, really appreciate your time and hanging with us there through some of the technical challenges that we all surely deal with from time to time. And again, all the way from Switzerland, David, thank you so much for joining me and hopping on this episode of the Code.
Thank you very much, Andrew, and have a great continuation. And I hope we'll have another podcast on the next.
That sounds great. Awesome. Thanks, you guys. We'll catch you on the next episode of The Code. We'll see you later.